I ruined my brother's life by calling the cops when his girlfriend was trying to unalive him. My older brother just left my house in tears. His daughter starts kindergarten this fall, and he wanted to be one of the parent volunteers for after-school activities and camps. He was denied because of an arrest that happened in 2002. He still doesn't know that it was me who called the police that day. Our parents divorced when I was 13 and my brother was 19. He had a house that he rented. Our mom was dragging the divorce out and I wasn't handling it well. My brother offered to let me stay with him until the dust settled. He dropped me off at school every morning on his way to work, made sure I got to my after-school activities, and most of all kept me from losing my mind in a very difficult time in my life. We would spend countless hours in the garage while he worked on his cars. I would rant about my silly teenage life and he would teach me everything about the work he was doing. Even if I was completely in the wrong on something, or completely overreacting, he would let me know it, but without being a jerk about it. I saw a kind, compassionate, dedicated man in him, instead of the distant, mean older brother he'd always been before this. He was the absolute rock I needed at that point in my life. But holy crap, did he have terrible taste in women. I had been living with my brother for almost a year when he started dating Kara. Within a few weeks she was basically living at his place. The argument started almost immediately. She would scream at him until all hours of the morning, throwing things or just generally smashing the place up. He never even yelled back. He kept the same even tone our father would use when our mom was upset about anything. When it got bad, he would just leave the house for a few hours, leaving Kara alone with me. I hated them both for this. It wasn't long before he started coming home from being with her with black eyes, bruises or scratches all over his face and arms. I asked him why he put up with her. He told me that she thinks she's pregnant, and he wasn't going to be a deadbeat, absentee father, no matter how much Kara pushed him to be. I asked him why he kept sleeping with her. He responded that he didn't want to, but the fight wouldn't end until he just let her have her way. That she just wouldn't let him sleep if they didn't make up. He told me that even if he managed to fall asleep, he'd wake up doing it either way. I asked him why he never called the police. He told me that was only going to make it worse. So many times he'd reach a limit and break up with her, pregnant or not. Once he even changed the locks, to which Kara responded by going on a week-long drinking bender, resulting in a loss of the pregnancy. A few weeks later the same cycle was repeating. She'd get pregnant, she'd start fights, she'd get violent, she'd binge drink, abuse substances, or something to lose the baby, they'd make up, grieve, and settle back in. Rinse, wash, repeat, for months. Sometimes he'd break up with her somewhere in the cycle, but really only in the beginning. It always made her escalate. They'd only been together for 6 months, but I could see the life draining from my brother's eyes with every repetition. He really was never the same person again. He started smoking every day. One December morning, my brother was out back working on his BMW. This car was his pride and joy. He bought it for $500 in 1998. It was a complete bucket of crap. It barely ran, and looked like it had spent its glory days completely submerged. Over the years he had completely overhauled it. Right when he and Kara started dating, the motor threw a rod. My brother found a replacement motor from a newer 3 Series and was in the process of installing it when Kara happened. Kara absolutely hated that car. She'd tell him often in arguments that he loved that stupid BMW more than he loved her. My brother barely had a chance to work on it once she came into the picture. I was in my bedroom, my brother was out working on the car. I heard Kara yelling as she came up the driveway. I couldn't make out what she was saying, but I could tell she was already amped up. I looked out from my window and saw her start hitting the car with a 4-foot breaker bar. She'd smashed out the headlights and the windshield, and was starting on the rest of the car. My brother just sat there, watching her do this. Every crunch and smash sent a cold spike down my spine. It was hard to watch, but I couldn't look away. Then she spun around and started hurting my brother. She hauled back the breaker bar and cracked him with it. He crumpled over from his chair onto the garage floor. That's when I grabbed the phone and called the police. I told the operator that my brother's girlfriend was trying to unalive him. I know I told them to hurry. I left the phone off the hook and started to run outside to do something. My brother came barreling through the back door, slamming it behind him, his entire face and shirt soaked. Kara got there just as he turned the deadbolt. She was screaming and banging and kicking on the door. It was honestly inhuman. There was a fire in her eyes that just terrified me. I ran back to my room and hung up the phone. At some point Kara went back to beating on the car. My brother just sat on the kitchen floor with his back pressed against the back door. The police arrived and the noise stopped. I remember my brother cursing under his breath that the neighbors called the cops. I kept my mouth shut. After a few minutes an officer knocked on the front door. My brother opened the door, and without a moment's hesitation, one officer grabbed him, shoved him against the railing and another handcuffed him. They loaded him in the back of one car and then both police cars pulled away. To my utter horror, Kara was still standing out front. She just got in her own car and left. A week later, my brother came home. He had a few broken ribs and a severe concussion. Kara told the police he had attacked her first, an absolute lie. The cops held him in interrogation for hours, and then a holding cell for days. He was arraigned but the charges against him were eventually dropped. The damage was already done. Kara told everyone that she dropped the charges because her baby needed a daddy, even if he was a crappy one. Another absolute lie. What few friends he had left abandoned him. To everyone on the fringes of his once expansive social circle, he was just the a-hole who tried to hurt a girl. In the week my brother was locked up, he got fired from his job at the shop. He ended up abandoning his lease in March and both of us moved back in with our dad. Mom had moved out of our dad's house by this point, so it was just the 3 of us. And sometimes Kara. She told my brother that she'd get him locked up again whenever she wanted if he acted up or tried to leave her. Kara never ended up having a baby, thank God. I don't know if it was because of miscarriages or if she was just making the whole thing up. He may have survived, but she unalived him that day. For months I would hear him crying at night, and it almost unalived me too. My brother struggled to get a job for a while but eventually ended up doing car audio stuff. He took a night job delivering pizzas also. Kara spent the next year or so making his life hellish. He would come home every couple of weeks with a bandaged arm or a black eye. She got him fired from the pizza place because she would show up and start arguments with him while he was working. She made him quit the car audio gig because the boss wouldn't let her in the service bay. He hopped around from shop to shop for a while, working as a mechanic's apprentice or parts driver or whatever he could find, always keeping at least one job if not two. When he was working a lot, she would berate him and start fights over how he was working too much and they never saw each other. When he wasn't working, or working only one job, she'd berate him about not being able to pay for her stuff. He didn't care. He didn't care about much of anything really. He just went to work, came home to smoke, and slept, that was it. Slowly Kara stopped coming around as much. Eventually she was just gone. I don't know if she got bored or whatever or if she found a new guy, I can't really say I care. My brother spent a long time in a pretty dark place. He never talked about it, but the dramatic shift in his personality over that year made it pretty clear to me. He never fixed the damage she did to his car. He got it running at some point, but never fixed the body work. It mostly sat for the next decade before he sold it. After Kara was gone he was able to hold steady work again, but he never strived to do much more than entry-level stuff. He never really had any real friendships after this either. He'd never admit it, but for someone that was so social before, he had to be lonely. It took a long while, but eventually my brother started dating again. He met his now wife in 2010. She was a great partner for him. He quit smoking and started to actually get his life together. He went back to school in 2015 and now has an engineering degree. They had their kid in 2018. He has been the absolute best dad for her. When their daughter came along, it was like my brother's old self got woken up again. I've never seen him so happy as he is when they're playing together or when she helps her papa fix something on the cars or around the house. He is so involved with everything she does. Of course he'd want to volunteer at her school. And then he finds out that he can't, and all I can see is that broken young man trying not to cry. He still doesn't know it was me who called the cops.